previously when we were given a function like this, in order to take the derivative, you would actually have to multiply it out and then use the power rule. Today we're going to learn about two rules that will allow us to work with functions that are being multiplied or being divided without actually simplifying it first. So the product rule, let's start with that, says if you have two functions being multiplied, the rule says you take the derivative of the first times the second plus the derivative of the second times the first. So instead of multiplying out the first problem, I'm going to go ahead and think of this as my two functions f of x and g of x, and let's go ahead and use the product rule. So the product rule says you take the derivative of the first, which is 3 minus 4x, keep the second function the same, 5 plus 4x, plus the derivative of the second, which would be 4, times the first function again, which keep the same. So this is actually your derivative rule. You're done. Now we are going to practice simplifying. So first thing you want to look for is, can I factor something I can't? So the only way to simplify this is to actually multiply everything out. So I've got 15 plus 12x minus 20x minus 16x squared plus 12x minus 8x squared. And then go ahead and collect all your like terms, and you should get to negative 24x squared plus 4x plus 15. So there's my derivative. Okay, second problem, same thing. Your two functions are 3x squared and sine of x. So my derivative rule for product says I can take the derivative of the first function, which is going to be 6x, times the second, plus the derivative of the second function is cosine of x, times first function is 3x squared. And this one, there's nothing else we can do, so we're going to leave that answer like that. Okay. C. So there's no other way to simplify this. If there was just one term on the bottom and more than one term on the top, you could separate into two separate fractions. So we're going to need to use our quotient rule here now. Quotient rule says take the derivative of the top times the bottom minus the derivative of the bottom times the top all over denominator squared. Notice if you look at the product rule and the quotient rule, the top of the quotient rule looks exactly like the product rule, but instead of a plus sign, you have a minus sign. Okay, so the rule says the derivative of the top, which is 3, times the bottom, minus the derivative of the bottom function, which is 2, times the top, all over denominator squared. So this is your derivative. Now we're going to practice simplifying. So when you're simplifying, what you want to try to do is see if you see a factor, something you can factor out on the top, which I don't. You're never going to multiply at the bottom because it's already in factored form. So leave the bottom always as is. If I multiply out the top, I have 6x minus 3 minus 6x. Bottom stays the same. So my final answer is negative 3 over 2x minus 1 squared. There's my derivative. Okay. Why don't you try the second one, pause the video, and then come back to check your answer. Okay, quotient rule says derivative of the top times the bottom minus derivative of the bottom times the top all over denominator squared. Again, if I look at the top, there's no GCF, so I'm going to multiply everything out on the top. 5x squared plus 5 minus 10x squared plus 4x. Denominator, clean up the top, and my final answer should be negative 5x squared plus 4x plus 5 all over x squared plus 1 squared. There's my derivative. Okay, last two problems. Why don't you pause the video, try these two on your own, and then replay the video to check your answers. Derivative, we're going to use our product rule. This is your first function, this is your second function. Derivative of the first is 2x minus 2 times the second plus derivative of the second is 3x squared times the first. Okay, make sure you have these things in parentheses. If you do not, it doesn't mean the same thing. Now, I do notice a couple things I'm going to factor here first. So notice here I have a 2 I can factor out. I'm left with an x minus 1. Notice this is your difference of cubes. I'm going to factor that to x minus 1, x squared plus x plus 1. plus this is going to stay. Notice this piece here I can factor to x minus 1, x minus 1. So here, we don't want to multiply all this out. I see a couple common factors. I notice that both terms have the x minus 1 quantity squared. So I'm going to go ahead and factor that out. So x minus 1 squared is going to come out of both of them. So that means from this term, the 2 is still left. The x squared plus x plus 1 is still left. Here, that comes out. The only thing that's left is the 3x squared. Now, after you factor it, then you're going to go ahead and now you can multiply all this out and combine like terms. So x minus 1 squared, this will give me 2x squared, so I have a total of 5x squared plus 2x plus 2. So this is the final simplified answer. Okay, and lastly, letter F, we're going to use quotient rule. So derivative of the top is 2x plus 2 times the bottom minus, derivative of the bottom is 2x, all times x squared plus 2x. Denominator squared, I'm going to go ahead and make it x to the 4th. Okay, here I'm going to go ahead and multiply off the top. If I do that, I'm going to get 2x cubed plus 2x squared minus 2x cubed minus 4x squared, all over x to the 4th. Notice the 2x cubes will drop out. I have a negative 2x squared all over x to the 4th, and that's going to simplify to negative 2 over x squared. Okay. Now, one last thing about letter F. So this is where you have to decide, is it easier to do the quotient rule? Or this one, it would actually have been easier if you had simplified it first. If I simplify this function, letter F, instead of using the quotient rule, I can rewrite this problem as 1 plus 2 over x. Notice, I have one term on the bottom, so I can split that up into two separate pieces. Now if I take the derivative from here, the derivative 1 is 0. This piece is really 2x to the negative 1. I just use my power rule. Bring down the negative 1, reduce the power by 1. Notice this is the same as this. So this would have been simpler to do this instead of going through and using the quotient rule. So you want to think about that before you start doing some of the problems. Is it easier to rewrite first, or should you just go straight to the product and quotient rule?